Roll call. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Chairperson Lorcher. Commissioner Sandoval,
Present.
Commissioner Grace,
Here.
Commissioner Garrett, and Commissioner Lorcher.
Here. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. There are no changes to tonight's agenda. Could I get a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and second to adopt the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We have two items on the consent agenda: to approve the minutes of March 7th, 2024 P&Z meetings, and facts, findings, and conclusions of law for Everbrook Academy file number H 2023-0051. Could I get a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and second to adopt the consent agenda. At this time, I would like to explain the public hearing process.
Madam Chair, I might have missed it, but did we take a vote on that? I know we had a
Oh, did
motion
we
and a
vote?
second, but need to
All
vote.
those in favor say aye. Excuse me.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. At this time, I would briefly like to explain the public hearing process. We will open each item individually and begin with staff report. Staff will report their findings on how the items adhere to our comprehensive plan and unified development code. After staff has made their presentation, the applicant will come forward to present their case and respond to staff comments. They will have 15 minutes to do so. After the applicant has finished, we will open the floor to public testimony. Each person will be called only once during the public testimony. The clerk will call the names individually for those who signed up on our website in advance to testify. If you can come to the microphones and chambers, or you'll be unmuted on Zoom. Please state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to address the commission. If you have previously sent pictures or a presentation for the meeting, it will be displayed on screen, and our clerk will run the presentation. If you have established that you are speaking on behalf of a larger group like an HOA, where others from that group will allow you to speak on their behalf, you will have up to 10 minutes. After all of those who have signed up in advance have spoken, we will invite any others in chambers who wish to testify, and that includes on Zoom. If you wish to speak on a topic, you may come forward in chambers or press the raise hand button. Or if you're only listening on a phone, please press *9 and wait for your name to be called. If you're listening on multiple devices, such as a computer and a phone, please be sure to mute those extra devices so we do not experience feedback and we can clearly hear you. When you are finished, if the commission does not have any questions for you, you will return to your seat in the chambers or be muted on Zoom and no longer have the ability to speak. And please remember, we will not call on you a second time. After all testimony has been heard, the applicant will be given another 10 minutes to come back and respond. When the applicant is finished responding to questions and concerns, we will close the public hearing so that the commissioners will have an opportunity to discuss and hopefully be able to make final recommendations or decisions to City Council as needed. Tonight, I would like to open the public hearing for item number H 2023-0062, annexation of 1.1 acre in the R2 zoning district for the purpose of connecting city utilities. We will begin with the staff report.
Good evening, members of the commission. The applicant has submitted an application for annexation and zoning. The site consists of 1.01 acres of land currently zoned R1 in Ada County, located at 3840 East Overland Road. History on the property is none. The comprehensive plan flume designation is mixed use regional. The applicant proposes to annex 1.01 acre parcel, including the adjacent right-of-way to the section line of East Overland Road with an R2 zoning district. A legal description and exhibit map for the annexation area is included with the application. The property is is within the city's area of city impact boundary. The reason for the annexation is the water table for the existing well on the single-family residential property failed late last year, and the applicant had to hook up to city water and sewer service. No new development or redevelopment of the property is proposed at this time, and the use will remain residential for the foreseeable future. The applicant has entered into an agreement with the city for extension of domestic water and sewer service outside Meridian city limits for the subject property. This agreement allowed the property to hook up to city water and sanitary service with disconnection from the private well and septic system. A provision of the agreement requires the property owner to apply for annexation of the property into the city as proposed with this application. Due to the presence of an existing home on the property with the intention to maintain its residential use, an R2 zoning district is requested as a placeholder zoning district until the property redevelops in the future. Opting for a zoning district within the mixed-use regional designation would create a non-conforming use. For example, a single-family residence dwelling on an acre is not a permitted use in a commercial zoning district, and it fails to meet density requirements for an R15 or R40 zoning district, which is not preferred. Prior to redevelopment, a rezone should be requested and development proposed consistent with the commercial flume designation. Single-family detached dwellings are listed as a principally permitted use in the R2 zoning district. To ensure future development is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the land use desired for this property, staff recommends a development agreement as a provision of the annexation pursuant to the Idaho Code section, which requires the property to be rezoned and the agreement modified to include a conceptual development plan prior to any change in use and/or development of the property. The proposed existing home appears to comply with the dimensional standards of the district. Access to the property is currently from East Overland Road. With future redevelopment of the property, access via East Overland Road and interconnectivity with adjacent properties will be evaluated in accordance with provisions listed in the UDC. Off-street parking is required to be provided in accordance with the standards in the UDC for single-family dwellings based on the number of bedrooms per unit. The existing home does not meet the required off-street parking spaces per the UDC table. For a 3-bedroom home, 4 parking spaces are required, at least 2 in an enclosed garage, and other spaces may be closed, or a minimum of a 10 by 20-foot parking pad. The existing home does not have an enclosed 2-car garage. However, there is an existing 30 by 20-foot driveway. The existing home is recognized as non-conforming due to the off-street parking requirements in the UDC. Per the UDC, no existing structure containing a non-conforming use may be enlarged, extended, constructed, reconstructed, moved, or structurally altered, except through the approval of a conditional use permit. As a result of the nonconformity, the applicant is required to apply for a conditional use permit for any future expansions on the property or attain compliance by constructing a new 2-car garage. Overland is improved with an existing 7-foot wide attached concrete sidewalk abutting the site in accordance with the UDC standards. Staff is not recommending that the sidewalk be replaced with a 7-foot detached sidewalk. The Meridian Pathways Master Plan map indicates a planned pathway on the north side of the 5 Mile Creek to be constructed by the city in the future. The applicant should submit a dedicated easement for the pathway to the city. Connection to city water and sewer services is required in accordance with the UDC. The applicant has entered into an agreement with the city for the extension of these water and sewer services outside of the Meridian city limits for the subject property. The applicant is currently connected to these city utilities. Written testimony is none, and staff does recommend approval of the annexation subject to the conditions and findings outlined in the staff report. And that concludes staff's presentation, and I stand for any questions.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff? Would the applicant like to come forward? I don't think he has.
Sir, if you do want to speak, you're welcome to come to the podium. You're not required to do so. I see you shaking your head. So For the record, I'll note the applicant has declined to comment. And so, Madam Chair, you may proceed.
Is there anybody signed up for public testimony?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do not have anybody signed up in person. There are a few attendees online if they would like to raise their hand and give testimony.
We haven't had this before, so you don't wish to speak. There's nobody here in chambers, so should we close the public hearing? May I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and second to close the public hearing. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, commissioners, do you have anything to say about this application? Or a motion?
Madam Chair, can I get a clarification? I don't have the benefit of the sheet that we normally get when I'm present in the city hall spaces. So this is a recommendation, as I understand it, to city council. Is that accurate?
Commissioner Grace, no, this is a annexation. We're not,
So, Madam Chair and Commissioners, Commissioner Grace, that's your comment, Commissioner Grace, is accurate. This is a recommendation to the city council relative to the annexation request. So you're a recommending body for this particular application.
Okay. And with that, Madam Chair, I would take a stab at a motion here if that's appropriate.
Okay.
So after considering all staff and applicant and public testimony, I move to recommend approval of file number H-2023-0062 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of March 21st, 2024 with no modifications.
Second.
it's been moved and second to approve file number H-2023-0062, annexation to Meridian City Council. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
And I'm an aye for the record.
Oh.
Sorry, Marie, I don't
heard
think
you
I
say
said
it.
anything.
Okay. The second item on the agenda is item number H-2023-0058 for a conditional use permit for city-side storage and a DA modification to allow a 4-story self-storage and increase the square footage of a building on 2.0 acres of land in the CG zoning district. We will begin with the staff report.
Good evening. I'm Linda Ritter, Associate Planner. So, Madam Vice Chair and Commission, this evening, the applicant is requesting a conditional use permit for and a DA modification to construct a 54.5-foot, 4-story, 135,000 square foot self-service storage facility containing 777 units and 15 exterior drive-up self-storage units and climate control structures for a total of 792 units with a building footprint of 32,500 square feet on 2.8 acres of land, zone CG, located at 2755 Eagle Road. Access to the site is from the existing private road, North Cajun Lane, which is this road back here, via Eustick Road or East Seville Lane from North Eagle Road. There is no direct access to the property from North Eagle Road. It is required, there is a total of 8 parking spaces that are proposed, which exceeds the UDC minimum standards as parking is based on the square footage of the office space, which is 862 square feet. There is existing a 20-foot landscape buffer with a 10-foot detached sidewalk along Eagle Road. The property owner is proposing an additional 10 feet of landscape along Eagle Road, which shall be installed per the standards of the UDC. A 25-foot wide buffer, landscape buffer is required for the residential land uses to the west of, as set forth in the UDC. There is existing landscaping along a multi-use pathway along the southern property boundary, which was installed with the previous development. There are no existing trees on the site other than the landscaping along the pathway, which will not be removed and protected during construction. Per the Parks Department, multi-use pathways already exist in this area and no additional pathways are required. Pedestrian lighting along Eagle Road is being required with this development and shall meet the UDC standards for post and luminaire. Historical type lighting will be required per the City of Meridian standards, except the height of these lightings will be 14 feet. Conceptual building elevations were submitted for the proposed structure. Building materials consist of metal panels and stone pattern tiles. Final design is required to comply with the design standards of our Architectural Standards Manual and the recorded agreement. The site plan depicts the faux stucco wall enclosing the property as fencing for the property. And as you can see, this is like renderings for the proposed structure. This is an aerial of the site, and it's surrounded by residential on the west side and on the south. And this is commercial along Eagle Road here. And across the street on the east side, this is a commercial area, and this area is, R40 with apartments. So this is a zoning map showing what is surrounding the property. And this is looking west on the property. This is looking east, and this is looking north. So the development agreement. The existing development agreement only allows uses such as retail, restaurant, and office. A storage facility is not considered office nor retail and is defined, and retail is defined as a use of a site that offers merchandise to the public for monetary compensation. The use includes, but is not limited to, convenience stores, food stores, apparel and accessory stores, books, computers, and music stores, electronics, appliances, floors, furniture and home furnishings, general merchandise, health, personal care stores, hobby, office supplies, stationery, gift stores, specialty stores, sporting goods, and used merchandise stores. So as you can see, our code does not define storage as retail. And the existing development agreement also has a maximum square footage of one single building in the CG portion of the project that shall not exceed 32,500 square feet. So the applicant's request is almost 4 times the square footage for the proposed storage facility than allotted to the existing commercial business within the subdivision. The new DA will add storage facilities as a use. It will increase the building square footage to 135,000 square feet with a building footprint of 32,500 square feet. So these are the comparison tables that I did showing what the square footage of the existing retail services are out there and the height of the different retail services and residential areas. Staff is recommending, because of the development agreement that is there, staff is recommending that applicant enter into a new development agreement as there are too many owners subject to the previous agreement. The new DA should also include parcel number R09455800265, which is another parcel that is owned by the applicant, along with a revised concept plan and commercial/office building elevation showing future development of this parcel. A provision in the new DA will limit the height of all the buildings to a maximum height of 35 feet. Staff is requesting that we receive this 15 days prior to the city council hearing. The applicant should provide a revised concept plan, commercial office building elevation, and legal description of the property that will be subject to the new DA. And again, the comparison tables that I showed you is a valuable tool for assessing the proposed development impacts of the neighborhood where it has the visual harmony and overall character. So a 64% increase in height compared to the tallest building in the immediate area is a significant difference, and that warrants careful consideration. Again, let me go back to this one. Sorry. Again, the applicant stated that the scale of the buildings make the project much more economically feasible since the high cost of the land can be spread across more units. The applicant also stated that the proposed height of 54.5 feet conforms with the existing CG zone allowance of 65 feet, which was a significant consideration in the developer's decision to purchase the land. Although the applicant has put forth several arguments in favor of the proposed location, building scale, emphasizing the transition with the existing residential area, economic feasibility, and adherence to the zoning regulations, it is important to remember there is an existing development agreement that regulates the uses and square footage of buildings on the property. It is also crucial to consider the visual and architectural harmony within the surrounding context. So this picture provides a snapshot of the height difference for the existing structure and the proposed self-storage facility. So as you can see, there is a significant difference in the height that's being requested and the height of the buildings that are along Eagle Road there on that west side. So staff feels that the proposed height will not be harmonious with the adjacent residential and commercial uses and will negatively impact these uses as it may lead to overshadowing of neighboring structures or altering the character of the area, which are a concern. So the visual impacts, the disproportionate height of the building may disrupt the visual harmony of the surrounding areas. It could potentially create an eyesore or clash with the existing aesthetics. It could create overshadowing. The height of the proposed building might cast shadows over the neighboring structures, impacting their natural light and potentially their functionality. And again, the character of the neighborhood, the proposed development may alter the character of the neighborhood or area. Maintaining compatibility with the existing structure is crucial for preserving the overall aesthetics and functionality of the neighborhood. So staff feels that the proposed storage facility would meet the dimensional standards for setbacks, landscape buffers, and parking requirements. However, the development agreement does not allow for storage facility as a use without an amendment to this agreement, to the existing DA agreement. And furthermore, in doing research on this, the CUP that was approved in 2006 limited the building. They wanted conditions added to the development agreement based on they were concerned about the compatibility of the the commercial area with the residential area. So they made sure that they would add something to the development agreement that the non-residential buildings would have a max square footage of 65,000 square feet, but only the maximum square footage of one single building could not exceed the half of the maximum request, which is the 65,000 square feet. So staff also finds that the proposed storage facility, if approved, that the requested height and square footage would not maintain compatibility with the existing structures, which is crucial not only for, again, aesthetics, but also functional integration with the new development in the community. Therefore, staff recommends that the building height not exceed 35 feet in height, which is consistent with the adjacent structures in the area, and staff is But staff is not opposed to additional square footage as long as the applicant keeps the structures at a maximum height of 35 feet. There was no written testimony for this. And again, staff, we recommend approval of this proposed modification to the development agreement and conditional use permit, subject to the conditions and the findings outlined in our staff report. And at this time, I'll stand for any questions that you may have.
Would the applicant like to come forward?
Thank you, Linda. Appreciate it.
Hi.
Uh,
Can you
Madam
please
Chair?
state your name and address for the record, please?
For these. My name is Ken Hosack, and I'm the CEO of Hosack Ventures and the owner of the property and developer of the property.
Can you also list your address, please?
My home address is 1403 West Camelback Lane, Boise,
Okay,
and I put it on the sign-in sheet as well.
perfect. Thank you.
I don't have the presentation. And everyone on Zoom. Okay. Okay, so I think I should be able to do it. All right, so Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Ken Hosack again. I'm CEO of Hosack Ventures. I'm the owner of the property via my ownership entity, which is called HV 55, Hosack Ventures 55, Highway 55. And then I am also the developer of the property via a development entity that I call Hosack Frank Ventures. And happy to be here. Linda, thank you very much. You did a great job on the staff report. I wanted to also introduce my team, if I can go here. I've added the architect, design house architecture. So Peter Stuhlreier and his team have been working on these concepts with me for over a year now, probably close to 2 years. And then I've brought, as land use consultants, I've brought in Rodney Evans and Ben Semple. And obviously, we've been having a lot of exchanges with them over the last few days in preparation. This site should be very familiar to the city of Meridian, both from the standpoint of planning staff, P&Z, city council, both current members and former members, because this has been up in front of you guys for 20 years, last 20 years. It's a very, very challenging, from a development perspective, it's a very, very challenging site to develop. And I'll go into the details on that. So if you look at the two parcels, and I shifted everything 90 degrees to the left. So on this, north is now to the left so that you can see the full property. But our application was for the big lot, 2755. And then staff asked that I actually show my concepts, what I'm thinking about for that back lot. So I'll be talking about that. The other thing is that dotted yellow line right below the text of the right lot. That was the former property line, and it just didn't make sense. So I worked with Pat Teely, we did a lot line adjustment, and we shifted the lot line right to that access road discount tire, because that's an easement, and it was a natural break between the two lots. So when I bought this 3 years ago, I knew that this was going to be a challenge to develop. The access to this site is incredibly poor. I mean, it's horrible. Without access to Eagle Road, any traffic from this site has to go through either that residential street, which is Cajun Lane, North Cajun Lane, or it has to go through the commercial parking lot that you see where those red lines are. And the red line where it crosses into the parking lot, we have an easement there. We took that easement in exchange for giving Discount Tire that easement. And when I say we, I'm talking about all the people before me. What makes this even worse is that it's bordered by residential on two sides. And so you see to the right, which is the south, is Carroll subdivision. People live on East Leslie Drive. And then on the bottom, which is actually to the west, all these townhomes, part of the Bienville Square subdivision number 3. Are there any neighbors here? Okay. That'll be good. That's the first neighbor feedback we've had. So
Madam Chair and Ken, I hate to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I'm just having a hard time hearing you. I'm online here. I was wondering if you could just put that microphone just a little closer, sir.
okay, how about this?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
We have a commissioner online.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Grace.
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, it's a challenging development. If I could, and hopefully this is better, and thanks for letting me know, because a lot of my team is online virtually. When you asked, wondering who those people were, I have a lot of my team on there. I have my wife, Lori, is there, my brother, my nephew, so I've got all the support I can. So, but anyway, if I could, let's see, this is going. I'm a PowerPoint expert, but this has me befuddled. Oh, and you said there was going to be a delay. So. Okay, so if I could wave my magic wand, what I would do is it's just really easy. I would add access to Eagle Road. I'd create a right in, right out intersection there, exactly opposite the existing one on the other side of the street. And I would take advantage of the existing deceleration lane that goes into Carroll's subdivision. I'd just extend that, and that would make this site very usable. But apparently I'm the only one that wants to do that. And I know that staff doesn't. I know the commission doesn't. I know city council doesn't. I know ACHD doesn't. I know ITD doesn't. So relax, I'm not asking for it, but that's just the fact. But what I wanted to do is recognize that, I read through the staff report. There's a lot of common ground in that. And I'm very happy that the project's been approved with the condition of the height. I mean, that's a big deal, but I think it recognizes that this location is a very sensitive area when you're transitioning from commercial to residential. Traffic, for self-storage, the use of self-storage has low traffic counts, low parking conflicts, less noise, neighborhood compatibility is pretty high. There's no neighborhood objections, and I'll add the word to date because, we'll find out in 10 minutes. Yeah, we don't agree. Self-storage is not retail, and I agree with Linda on this because UDC gets to call that. But if you talk to commercial real estate brokers that specialize in self-storage, everyone in the industry considers it quasi-retail. And I'm not going to try to make that point to argue not doing a DA, but I just want everyone to understand that it actually is a good compatible fit for that area. We agree on access, parking, sidewalks, landscaping, fencing, outdoor lighting, utility, dimensional standards, actually. And I think everyone is relieved we're not actually asking for access to Eagle Road. So the only issue we have is that the proposed condition of height doesn't work. And so I'll just go through that. So if I look at the key discussion items between the staff, the applicant and the staff, it's really boils down to 3 things: use, height, and square footage. And really the key thing is the height. The height's what drives the square footage. But also I want to go through the background of the use because I want to explain my path, my thought process for getting to this self-storage use. Because frankly, it wasn't my #1 pick. I didn't even think about it when I bought the site. So I read, and as part of my due diligence, I looked at the zoning, which, obviously is CG, lets me go up to 65. I looked at the current DA, which limits us to office, retail, restaurant. And I thought, great. I had worked with John Price when I helped my father develop Cityside Lofts in downtown Boise, 77-unit condo project, right at the edge of the connector. John Price, 15 years ago, did a fabulous job. So I called up John, he's retired. But so he basically connected me with some folks in the office, and I said, hey, I want to do some concepts. And so the first concept they did was commercial, exactly what the DA wants. Office, retail, restaurants. It's about 20,000 square feet across 3 buildings with access. I had them two versions, one with access to Eagle Road and one without. And then I reviewed it with my commercial real estate broker, who is Jim Hosak, who's in the room. And, but more importantly, I reviewed it with my banker. And my banker now is chief credit officer at one of the local community banks. And I do all my banking with them. She's fabulous. And they both said that without Eagle Road access, this project is dead on arrival. And my banker actually went to the next step and said, look, I love you, Ken. We bank with you all the time, but I don't think the bank would finance this as a dead end project. It's literally at a dead end. And she said, if you were to try to fill that up with restaurant users, retail users, office, you would have to lower the lease rate so much that it would be below your cost to compete with all the people that do have access. Made me sad, because that's why when I bought the property, that's kind of what I was looking at. So then my father, who's a real estate developer, he had a civil engineering firm here. He's done a ton of projects here in Meridian, West Boise, downtown Boise, the Highlands. He offered to take a stab. And so he took that project and he took all 7, he took created one subdivision with 7 lots. And I liked it because from a risk standpoint, I can phase that. I can do retail, office, restaurant. I can do build to suit, build to spec, and I can really reduce the risk. But he said it just doesn't work without access to Eagle Road. So at this, and by the way, I'll answer this. Staff had asked me to show my concept for the back lot, that other lot. And so, you know, again, that's the one to the north of this lot adjacent. And so it's a simple 7-story, single story, 7,000 square foot office building with a separate parking lot, just to try to make it easy. So there's nothing fancy back there. And the reason Linda wanted me to include this is I think the concept is we do one DA modification that covers both, so we don't have to come back here. So at this point, it became really clear that even though I wanted to, that retail, restaurant, and office wasn't going to work on this. And there's a reason this is the last undeveloped lot in that commercial subdivision. So I had the architect look at some other things, vertically integrated residential. I mean, there's a housing shortage. And so he did 2 concepts, one that was 36 units, one that was commercial 8,000. And anyway, did a podium story, 4-story podium with 56 units. It actually, the nice thing is it's permitted use, so I don't need a conditional use permit. I don't need to come here for that. And but I'd have to look at the development agreement to see if there is a commercial element of this that might meet the standards for the development agreement, but it's another discussion. So looked at garden style apartments with access to Eagle Road, et cetera. Looked at self-storage, did a single story, 28,000 square feet across 9 buildings. At that point, that's when I brought in the team at Design House, because they're self-storage experts and worked on a multifamily design. That's where we got this design. So the reason I'm going through these concepts with you is I really wanted to do retail, office, and restaurant. That's what I thought I could do. It's not possible at that space without access to Eagle Road. And you know, if I'm unable to make this work and I sell the project, you're going to be dealing with this for years. So I did go get a lot of neighborhood feedback. 100% positive. They would rather see, and I met with representatives of each of the 2 HOAs to the east or to the west, and they were 100% supportive. So I took a long time on this, and there are a lot of benefits that are in the narrative, but the bottom line is there's a high neighborhood happiness factor for doing self-storage, and I don't think staff questions that. So let me just go into a couple of the other key things. I'm looking at that clock. The issue is the building height. I'm zoned at 65. We proposed 55. Staff came back at 35. I was only aware that the 35 requirement was going to come out about 3 days ago. So I really have, I think there's some options that we have to negotiate on this. We don't have to be at 55, but I wanted to walk through, you know, a walk through the neighborhood to kind of see some of these pictures. I'm going to do this quickly. So on the, first of all, retail, This is the retail mecca of Idaho. When you combine Fairview and Ustick, there's no doubt that even compared to Boise Town Mall, this is better. If you look to the west, one thing you notice about the townhomes, and they're 30 feet, it's garages, blank walls, and small windows that are opaque that go to bathrooms. And the reason for this is the same developer did this subdivision that was doing the commercial subdivision, Corey Swain. Corey Swain envisioned that there were going to be tall buildings, and he designed these buildings specifically so that wouldn't affect them. And here's the view from across the street. And again, this is the full 55. I think we can go much lower. And my presentation just went down. Is there any way to pause the clock until I get it back?
We'll add a minute.
Thank you. Time out. Is there any way to put that in there or just? Let me see if it's a Zoom thing. It's possible that Zoom is not full screen. If we can get out of full screen. Up that. Let me just try to get it full screen mode. And who's running the timer?
The city clerk is, she'll.
Okay,
take
if
care.
you're okay with letting me have an extra minute, then what I'd suggest is let it give me 2 minutes and then start the timer again. It is distracting, but I also need the time to kind of walk through these pictures, if that's okay to you guys. Okay, so I do need to go, before you start it, I do need to go back to where I was though. Okay, this is not letting me go back.
I think we ended with number 43.
Yeah, here's where I was. I was on 30.
Oh, okay.
All right, so I'll go through these quickly. This is the view. If you look at the view from their sidewalk at the building, yes, it is tall. I think there's some compromise we can do to get that down. If you look to the south, which is Carroll subdivision, I'm standing in the middle of this lot. I took it yesterday. They've been planning for tall buildings here for years. I mean, these homes were built and they've been through all the Corey Swain DA modifications. I was surprised that no one from Lexington Lane was here because they were a ton of them here. If you look at the top, you can see that there are basically 3 lots that are directly south and they all have a ton of trees. My architect did a rendering from the backyard of one of those, and you can see that, they're outbuilding in the trees. They're not even going to see the project. We purposely masked the project away from the residential area, and that's why we wanted the extra height, is so that we could put it towards Eagle Road, towards Commercial Tire, and away from the rest of the project. Discount Tire, I reviewed the plans with their headquarters in Scottsdale. They loved it. We had proactively stepped the building back 10 feet from the boundary. All they wanted was the northbound traffic on Eagle Road to see the side of their building. They're really happy with it. And this is the view from the southeast, again, where the neighbors are. So I walked across the street, not literally. This is what's being built. Everything is 4 stories. So this is directly across the street. This is a little bit to the southwest. This is the view down below of a self-storage project that was approved here at Planning and Zoning and by City Council. I'll talk about that later, just directly across the street. The application was 50 feet, 42 to 50 feet. This walking down the street, the Boise Co-op, I thought this was an interesting point of how you're able to put 4-story buildings right next to 2-story buildings and make them look good. I don't think anyone argues that this is an issue. So on the renderings, again, I kind of mixed these through. This is across the street from the west. This is the full 54 feet. If we get that down, it'll be less of a contrast. But again, we didn't know that we had to. So what's typical for self-storage? I looked at 3 projects: the U-Haul project on Franklin, the U-Haul project on Overland, and the box storage project across the street. 50 for a 4-story, 39 for a 3-story, about 50 for, Bach asked for 42 to 50. Here's the U-Haul. Here's the other U-Haul. Here's the box storage. And this is the box storage application with the mayor's signature. So one thing about economic feasibility I wanted to just go through is the revenue is directly proportional to the number of floors, but the construction cost is not. The construction cost is a fixed element and a variable element. And what that means is and I did this chart, as you reduce the stories, it's basically cutting, from 4 to 3 to 2 is cutting it to 75% of revenue, 50% of revenue. But the cost, because of the fixed cost of the land, the landscaping, the foundation, the site plan, the utilities, you're spreading across fewer floors. So one other thing is, as a developer, we have strong incentives for reducing the height of each floor and reducing the height of the building. It's more costly to build, and it's more costly to operate because you're heating extra space. If you shrink the space, it's less space. So we are all for bringing this down. So anyway, I think the path for compromise on this is to recognize that this is a subjective nature of determining neighborhood fit. And based on the renderings I showed you, based on the compatibility, based on talking to the neighboring HOAs, they do not see it as incompatible. They're so relieved that it's not, thousands of cars a day with drunk drivers trying to get to their apartment. They recognize, but I think everyone recognized the project's not feasible without 4 stories. I hired 2 feasibility consultants, $7,000 each, and they basically said 4 stories. So we understand the city wants to reduce the height. There's no neighborhood objections. We want to recognize zoning height. So what we're proposing is a compromise of 48 feet. It's less than the 55 feet that's in there. It's higher than 35, but 48 is the least height that we can get to and still do 4 stories, because this project doesn't hunt with 4 stories. One thing I want to say is, for square footage, in my 20 seconds left, the maximum of 32,500 is building footprint. I've always known that. The way these are created is, and this is how you look at that floor area ratio with a lot, they look at all the lots and they want to see how much is the building footprint versus this. The DA was not clear, so I called Corey Sway, the developer, and his recollection was it was the building footprint. I only had 3 days to research it, so I'll stop there, and I understand I may have another 10 minutes as a rebuttal. Thank you. So do we turn it over to comment, or do you have questions for me now?
So the next step is we will take public testimony, and then we will ask you to come back up. And if there's other questions, we could ask you at that time.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, is there anybody signed up for public testimony?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have Veda Ballard.
Hi, if you can please state your name and address for the record, please.
Vita Ballard, 646 West Sedgwick, here in Meridian. I'm pleased with the idea that it's coming down in height. That excites me. My interest in this whole thing is I own 3 properties that are across the street from this building, 2 directly across on North Cajun. I'm a little bit concerned when we go from 32,500 in square feet to 135. Obviously, that doesn't just include one level. It includes the other building that he's talking about that I've never seen. Is that true?
No, the building, the footprint of the building would be 32,500. That would be like the size of the actual building, but then the actual volume of the building, he's suggesting is 135,000 square feet.
That's a big jump.
It is a big jump. But he's suggested in his presentation that it would go from 54 feet down to 48 feet.
Yeah, and I'm excited about that. I saw the original plans, they sent them to me, and I'm quite thrilled with them. I'm delighted that they're coming, I don't have a problem with that. It's the idea that we have this enormous giant up there, and I guess I don't have a chance, but I'm going to talk against the giant across the street from this very pretty residential neighborhood. And I know it's being set back, and there's kind of a park-like area in front of it, and I'm thrilled with that. I'm just concerned with the height. It's like all of a sudden the homes are downtown instead of being out in residential, nice neighborhood of Meridian. It's just going to make all the difference in the neighborhood if they're that height. So that's my concern, and I wanted to tell you about it.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in chambers that would like to testify?
Madam Chair, no one else has signed up online or in here. If anybody online would like to raise their hand, they may.
All right, the applicant may come forward.
Okay, so I just want to say that that's very courageous of you to come up and be able to do that. So thank you very much for the feedback. Yeah, this is again, this is a very, very difficult piece of land to develop. And again, when I talk about feasibility, well, actually, let me go back to the original intent of the subdivision. So Corey Swain, when he had the entire Bienville Square area, which now consists of Bienville Square Commercial. It consists of the Bienville Square subdivision number 3, which is where she has 3 of the units. A majority of the units in that area are owned by investors, by the way. It's well over 50%, if not closer to 70. And then Jackson Square. And as you know, this is a very vocal neighborhood. These are the people that came in here for the Oasis nightclub. These are the people that have come in here for the Villa Sports Center that you guys have discussed. These are the people that have coming in for the massive apartment building that replaced it. This is the only neighborhood feedback that I've gotten around this. And I wish, and again, I know Linda is doing a great job on this. We could, if we had known, because this didn't really come up in our last 2 pre-application meetings. Linda asked about 3 floors. We discussed it verbally, but it wasn't in the staff report. So, if I had known a little bit earlier, we might have been able to negotiate something a little bit. But at this point in the game, it's a really tough time to do this. The other thing I would say is on the square footage. Again, I think I'm glad that you have counsel. I think it's worth looking into. I reached out to determine this building footprint issue, which you brought up, and so I'm addressing it as part of my discussion after that. I really believe that it was 32,500 feet, but the DA was written so poorly, it didn't really decide that. But that's what architects do, is they limit the building footprint, and then you control the height through zoning and other things like that. I called Corey Swain, or I sent him an email, and he came back and last night confirmed that his recollection is that it was the footprint. I reached out to our good friend Bob Unger, who, and thankfully he is retired and living in France, but he's been helping me for the last couple of years, wasn't able to get him. I reached out to Idaho Mutual Trust, which also owned this property during the turmoil. Their real estate attorney at the time, Ben Slaughter, just by coincidence, happens to be my current real estate attorney. And so I reached out to him, and he said, this is so long ago, it can't be for sure, but to him, it made sense that it would be the building permit. He reached out to Dan Bureau at Idaho Mutual, and Dan said, I have no idea. So I think the intent there is that it would be the building footprint. You control it, but I think there's work if, so my recommendation, you know, kind of in closing, is that, you know, obviously we're seeking approval from the Planning and Zoning Department. And if I were to write the motion, and I understand that that's a very, you know, I'm trying to be humble about this, but if I were to suggest a recommended motion, I would recommend that we lower the maximum height to 48 feet. I'd like to actually keep it at 54 or 50 because I think it's in our mutual best interest to have some discussion around the parapet at the top and trying to get some vertical articulation in it. And, but if we were to approve 54, 50, or 50, I would give you my personal commitment that I would do everything possible to get this as low as possible and maximize that height per floor. The first floor, we're a little constrained because we want to keep the noise inside the unit. So the first floor needs to be a little higher for us to have indoor loading trucks. You need a little bit of height to be able to back a truck in there and keep it inside. But every floor above that, we'll do the bare minimum. And, you know, we might be able to get it down to, you know, 44 without the parapet. But then again, it's, you know, you don't want that U-Haul look where you have a flat line that goes across a city block. I think there's some opportunity to articulate it. In fairness to the neighbors, we don't need to do that on the backside of the project at all. I mean, if we're going to have that height, it's possible you get that height on the Eagle Road side, and maybe, you know, you start with a 45-foot building and you do 2 feet, get it up there to 47. But anyway, that's why I'm recommending that that we consider, at a minimum, approving 48 feet. As you walk through the neighborhood, I think I hopefully I was able to convey through all the renderings that we did, looking at the way that the subdivision was designed, the way Corey Swain designed it, knowing that there were going to be tall buildings. And then I just, you know, if we're going to modify the DA, just make it clear by adding the word footprint. It just makes it clear. I opened Pandora's box by trying to specify the gross square footage, and I should have never done that. And then, you know, consider, I don't know how important vertically integrated residential is to this commission, but consider making sure that that's specific as a use in the development agreement. It might be considered already in there because it's got that commercial element, but if that's something you want to work on, that's something to do too. I would say the one other thing on the height is it is incredibly important to me that the development agreement say that that only applies to self-storage. Because if I can't do if the numbers don't work and I can't do a project and I have to sell that land, I can't have that. I need to let someone else fight that battle, not me. And so I can't artificially constrain to a certain height. On the CUP, no changes. I mean, a lot of those conditional, in fact, you know, the color, I think Linda made a comment about, you know, that's not really compatible. I'm not a color guy. The architect said, what color do you want? I said, my favorite color is green. So it's green in there. But the reality is, when we get serious about this, it's going to be compatible with the neighborhood, compatible with, it's going to be a lot more neutral probably with the surrounding environment. What I'm hoping that you hear from me is I have no issues working with staff to make this a great project, but I need 4 stories, or I should say the project needs 4 stories to be viable. And I will do everything I can to minimize the height of those 4 stories. let me just look at one last thing. Okay. Yeah, like I said, I'm a PowerPoint expert, but I always, there it is. I always have the mouse button go back. Yeah, so this is a slide I wanted to talk about is the, keep the maximum building footprint at 32,500. I think that's adequate. Reduce the height to 48 or maybe a little higher if we want to work out that vertical articulation. Only for self-storage. Reserve the right to build a conforming use or a permitted use. And, we can look at what the DA language is supposed to be around building footprint, and we can change it as necessary. So I think the last thing I would say, just to kind of recap where I came from, this is over the last 3 years, I've put a lot of time, effort, and money into trying to get this development. I really wanted to do retail and restaurant and office. I own office buildings around here as investment property, and a great time to own office, by the way. But that was my original intent, but it does not work without Eagle Road access. And whether you're working with me or anyone else, it's got to be a use that's feasible. And right now, the numbers don't hunt with any of the other alternatives except for self-storage. And the reason the neighbors like it, again, you've got maybe 20 cars a day versus hundreds or thousands of cars. You have no parking conflict. The people that go there are not going to park in other people's spots. They're going to their unit to get, unload and load. And that's important to the commercial folks. They were very clear, and that's one of the reasons they support it. You're not going to have noise. You have internal units, internal loading docks. You're not going to have incompatibility with neighbors. You're not going to have infighting, what you get when you put in any other use there. People are always fighting across the street, it seems, HOA battles and stuff like that. It's a very, very easy, compatible use for the neighborhood. And it really is, I think, after looking at this, after hiring consultants, feasibility consultants, and all the work I've put on this, this is the ideal use for the transition from commercial to residential. And I respect your feedback. But the representative from the HOA, Leanne, also lives across the street, and she's on the board of the HOA for that complex, and she's the one that basically said, look, compared to all the other uses, this is the one we want. Questions?
Commissioners, do we have any questions for the applicant?
Sorry, Commissioner Sandoval, you can go if you had a question. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
My question is,
With Commissioner Sandoval, I know where to look.
yeah, there we go. Yeah, my question is for the applicant. So there's a lot of conflict between what's in the staff report and what you're proposing. Would you prefer continuance so you can talk about that? I know you mentioned several times that you haven't had a lot of time to prepare, only a couple days. Would that be in your best interest?
I really, if I get a recommendation right now for 48 feet and maybe clean up the language to support that, we're done. I have to present this to City Council regardless because it's a development agreement modification. And so this is going to, whether it's an appeal or whether it's a, just a quick one to basically support the recommendations, the updated recommendations. I don't know which ones could be, but I don't think I need a continuance. I do know that if I do have to appeal this to City Council, that I'm going to have counsel with me. My old tennis partner, Joanne Butler, was my favorite person, and I'm so sad that she's not with us anymore. But, I have to have someone like Jeff Wardle or someone like that, because the absolute fact is this doesn't work without 4 stories. I've paid $15,000 for market feasibility. They look at demographics, competition. They look at development cost. They look at the unit mix. They look at revenue. This is not a subjective thing. It's very, very objective. And for this location, it has to be 4 stories. So, right now, the 35 feet, to me, I can only do 2 stories. because you have to have that extra high first floor to get the trucks inside. And then you need a floor and you need some articulation. At that feet, you can stand up on the townhomes on their roof and look down on the roof of my building. So I think, with them at 30 feet and with us at 48 feet, given that that 48 is actually the Eagle Road side, not the back side, and given that we mashed the building all the way to Eagle Road, and we're using our courtyard where people drive in as a buffer to the residential, we're presenting, it's an L-shaped, so we're presenting the end of an L to that neighborhood. So this, to answer your question, I don't think I need a continuance. I just need an approve with 48 with kind of what I had put on there, and maybe clean up some of the language to support it, or a denial, and I'll take it to City Council.
Thank you.
Do you have any follow-up or you're good?
That's it.
Commissioner Grace, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I had a couple. So, Mr. Hosek, are you saying that 48 feet is your absolute minimum that you can go to?
Yes, if you count parapet, that parapet as part of that. And that's another way of approving it, is if you approve to the roof line, I'll tell you exactly what I need. I need 12 feet for the first floor, 11 feet for the next 3 floors. So that's 45, and then a parapet. And if you can approve the roof height at 45, give or take a couple inches, and let staff kind of look at different concepts for how high the parapet would be based on what is something that you need to make it fit the nature and character of the environment, not make it look like a flat haircut across the brow.
Okay, thank you for that. So can you tell me a little bit more about, you said you talked to the residents, and then the only comment we received was someone who is not in favor of this. Can you just give a little more explanation as to why, or what you did to talk to the residents, what you did to reach out to the neighbors?
Yeah, I went to the Idaho State Business Entity website. I printed out the annual reports that list the officers for the HOAs, both of them, both BS number 3 as well as Jackson Square. And I went out and reached out to all of them and met with them. I met with the Jackson Square. I actually attended a different neighborhood meeting for that big, massive apartment complex that was going to replace Villasport, and obviously there were a bunch of the Jackson Square folks that were involved in that. And I met with them personally, showed them the renderings. They love the fact that you don't have drunk drivers driving through there at night like any other use would. And then, I didn't mention this, but I'm president of the Commercial Owners Association, and it's a master association that also includes the residential BS number 3. It's really complicated, bizarre. And I've agreed with Leanne. I've been negotiating with her to basically give them their independence so it doesn't roll up into our commercial association. I don't think it should, but it's conditional on getting a shared use permit. But so I reviewed this with Leanne. She's been keeping all of the other board members in the loop on that. But there's 2 big informational signs sitting in front of the project right now. There is a mailer that we sent out for our neighborhood meeting. We had 0 attendees. We had a mailer sent out for this meeting, and we had 1 brave soul that chose to show up here. It's because they don't see it as an issue, frankly. And again, the neighborhood happiness factor, which is this proprietary metric that I created personally to measure neighborhood opinion, actual opinions of, how they feel about traffic, parking, noise, compatibility. The neighborhood happiness factor on this is very, very high. So I just don't think that's an issue. In fact, the only objection I've heard tonight was to the height, and I'm proposing to lower it significantly. I mean, I just like to go back to that my path to compromise chart that shows that.
Yeah. Okay,
Is this one. So yeah, I'm proposed right now, the proposed height of 55 is 85% of what's allowed in the CG zone. Staff was asking for 54% of what's allowed in the CG zone. And again, that would be 2 stories. That frankly that's a taking. I mean, if you look at that, but I'm not going to go there now. But the proposed compromise, I'm trying to get it to 74% of what's allowed in the CG zone. And
Can I just interrupt you? There's an existing DA though, right?
yes, yeah, in fact, the only reason I'm here is the DA does not talk about height whatsoever. It has a building footprint of 32,500. The only reason I'm here is because self-storage is not considered retail by the UDC, even though the rest of the commercial real estate world views it as quasi-retail. I mean, we have people in the front office, we're selling boxes, we're trying to sell a product. Our product is self-storage unit. Everybody for self-storage, they're looking for areas heavy in retail with high visibility, which is perfect on Eagle Road. But yeah, the development agreement does not say retail, and I would argue that I just made a very good case why, with the development agreement, that you can't develop anything there.
Well, that may be so. I mean, I don't know, but I don't know. I guess maybe I just take issue with the idea that it's a possible taking at 54%. There's an agreement in place for what needs to occur there. And but anyway, I appreciate your answers. Thank you for indulging me. I don't want to take up all the conversation, and that's all I have, Madam Chair.
And I would just say, the current DA, the current zoning, if I could, with the building footprint, if I can get the parking inside the building, I can build a 4-story, 5-story, 6-story office building there. I'd probably have to have the first 2 floors of parking. I wouldn't need a DA. I wouldn't need a conditional use permit. The neighbors would hate me. And that's the thing I want you to consider, is the neighbors do not want me to do the permitted use, what's allowed by the DA, what's allowed by the zoning, and do what I'm supposed to do. It doesn't work, because the only way that you can get in and out of that parking garage is through that North Cajun Way or through the commercial lot. But that's what I'm allowed to do. So that's why I'm not, if I'm being steered towards doing retail, office, restaurants, it's going to be a really hard project. It's going to need Eagle Road access. I'm going to have to fight ITD to get it. It's going to be a multi-year project. So yeah, if you want me to come down from 65 feet to be able to do self-storage, I'm agreeable to that. And I think I'm just asking to have us meet in the middle. That's it.
Commissioners, are there any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, public hearing closed. Commissioners, we've heard a lot of information tonight. I wanted to ask the city attorney what our purview is tonight, because we are not the deciding factor here. This goes to city council for the DA modification, correct?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a little atypical. Oftentimes, the commission is the deciding body with regard to conditional use permits. In this instance, however, the conditional use permit is linked to the request to modify the development agreement. And for that reason, the commission is not a deciding body tonight. You are making a recommendation to the city council relative to the development agreement modification request, as well as the conditional use permit. So you're making a recommendation tonight on both topics. And actually, really under the city's code, really even the development agreement is really a department director recommendation, but I know staff has asked and is interested in hearing the commission's recommendation on that. I'm sure the city council is as well.
Okay. Well, I guess I just have a few comments. I wish there was at least some written testimony from the neighbors to support the project, because right now we have one neighbor who likes the idea of self-storage but doesn't like the height. And all the other comments that you've made are from you and not directly from them. And not saying that that's not true, but we can't really get a pulse for what's happening in the neighborhood. I guess in one sense we can, because nobody's made any comments, whether it's positive or negative. But, you know, the HOA presidents, you know, aren't here to be able to corroborate based on what you're saying. The second thing is with the height, there's a DA modification in place. And I think as a council, we're limited to that based on the application in front of us. It doesn't mean that we can't add to the motion tonight, but we're not the deciding body on what the height should be, except what's written in the DA modification. And the UDC says it's 35 feet and its intended uses are not self-storage. So those things are already written. So I feel like a little bit in that sense, our hands are tied, but when we do make a motion, we can kind of make some recommendations to city council on that. So commissioners, what other things would you like to say?
Yeah, I have a comment. I'm in agreement with the gentleman that I think 48 feet is acceptable, given the fact that I understand the economic necessity of 4 stories. I think that makes it a viable project, and the fact that it's a storage use as opposed to other uses. So I would support a modification to the by staff to 48 feet from the 35. As they said, I think that's completely acceptable. I'm not saying that the lack of HOA is here, but I think if they were adamant about it on a negative side, I'm sure they would have been here. So I think it's a positive sign that they're not here.
Commissioners, any other comments?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I want to thank Mr. Hosek. I appreciate his testimony about the feasibility, the economics involved. And I appreciate the things that he's tried to do to make this, you know, amenable and reasonable with the surrounding community in terms of pushing the building as far as he can toward Eagle Road and having more of the office building on the north lot. But I'm not sure I'm in favor of any modification of the staff's recommendation to this. I heard a lot of testimony tonight, but honestly, I have to say it was really all about what's in the best interest of the project and the developer. And I didn't hear anything about what's in the best interest of the city. And that concerned me a little bit. And I do appreciate the work that went into this and what Mr. Hosek's trying to do to make it, you know, less intrusive to the neighborhood. I guess respectfully to my Commissioner Garrett, I guess I would look at this as I would probably move this forward as is and maybe let the city council have to, you know, sort of go through that again or maybe what's a better idea is that the recommendation is for the applicant to get with staff and try to figure something out here that works. I do agree with Commissioner Garrett. If there was a lot more disapproval of this from the neighbors' side, I'd like to think we would have heard those folks, and we didn't. So I do think there's room to work here. I do think there's some negotiating room here between the applicant and how high this building is. And I think height is probably the only issue. So I would prefer to move this through as is. So that's where I'm at with this. Thank you.
Commissioner Sandoval, do you have any comments?
I do. Looking at this, more looking through the lens of consistency with the neighboring property heights, the visual impact, and I just don't see it being there. Personally, I think we should recommend denial just based on the height and the applicant being not able or really willing to work with staff very much on the height or ask for a continuance. So that would be my course of action.
Well, I think the applicant indicated he would not like a continuance, and understanding that we are not the deciding factor here, and that it gives you time to be able to work with staff on the DA modification and the conditional use permit. We are not in a position, I do not believe we are in a position to change any heights of anything because the DA modification is already in place. That development agreement would have to be changed in order for that to happen, correct?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll expand upon that a bit in the sense, so there's an existing development agreement in place. I don't believe that development agreement contains an explicit height limit. What's being discussed this evening, we have a request to amend or modify that development agreement, and the staff recommendation is that if the city council entertains an amendment, one aspect of that amendment should be a height limitation, and the recommendation from staff is 35 feet.
Okay.
So that's sort of the lay of land there. And while I had the microphone, let me just, for the record, just wanted to clarify, there was a comment made, I'm paraphrasing now, that in reference to the UDC and that it has a 35-foot height limit. That's not the case. As the applicant mentioned, the actual, for this zoning district, the height limit in the city's zoning ordinance is 65 feet.
Yeah.
But because we're dealing with a development agreement and a request to modify, the recommendation from staff is that as part of that modification, that the 35-foot limit be part of that modification. So,
And as well as the usage currently under the DA does not allow storage, correct?
yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So that's another proposed modification to the current existing development agreement, is that right now, self-storage is not an allowed or permitted use. So part of the modification is to modify the permitted uses to allow self-storage as well.
Madam Chair, if I may. So the applicant is saying that he's unclear about the 32,500 square feet and whether it's the total square footage or if it's the building footprint. The DA is very specific that it's the overall square footage for the building, so it's not the footprint. The developer, Corey Swain, who developed this site in the March 14, 2006 presentation to the city council, the planning director stated that the developer requested the maximum square footage. So he suggested that condition basically because of the close proximity of the existing and future residential uses. And he wanted to ensure that when this property was developed, it was in a fashion that is consistent with the comprehensive plan designation and not negatively impact nearby properties.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, there's one last clarification for the record as well. There was some comments, I think, from the applicant, if I recall, about sort of if there's a denial this evening, for example, by the commission, that there would be an appeal to city council. And I sort of addressed this earlier in a different way, but that's not quite the case. What really, as I mentioned earlier, the commission is not making a decision at all. You're making a recommendation to the city council, so there's no decision to appeal. you're making a recommendation. The council will make a decision, and that decision would be potentially appealable, but you're not making a decision, you're making a recommendation.
Recommendation, okay.
And Madam Chair and Council, if we move to recommend approval as written, sort of with the staff comments and conditions, that's how it would be approved, but we could offer recommended modifications to it, correct?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Grace, that is correct. So part of your recommendation could be to say, as you often do for applications of this nature, to say, you know, a motion could potentially be just hypothetically, you know, a motion to approve the staff recommendation, but with change X, Y, and Z. And in that case, it'd be a recommendation to the council, but certainly the commission's has the ability and the prerogative to deviate from what staff recommended and make a recommendation that would be slightly different or drastically different for that matter.
Sure, thank you.
Any other comments from commissioners? A possible motion?
Madam Chair, I'll throw one out just to see if it's something the rest of the commission is tracking with, but this is file number 0058, is that correct?
Correct.
After considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to recommend approval of file number H-2023-0058 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of March 21, 2024, with no modifications.
Do I have a second?
Madam Chair, if there's no second, that motion dies and you can entertain a new motion.
Okay,
Okay, I'll propose a motion that after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to recognize the approval of the City Council of file number H 2023-0058 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of March 21st, 2024, with the following modifications: that the height be set to no greater than 48 feet and same footprint of 32,500.
the footprint of the entire, okay, so the footprint of the building, but the square footage to be the 135,000 or,
Is correct.
do I have a second?
So, Madam Chair, if there's no second to that motion also dies and you may entertain another motion.
Okay, so we're just making a recommendation to city council. The DA in place is very specific that the maximum square feet of the building should not be greater than 32,500 square feet and the height being 35,000 square feet.
Madam Chair, sorry to interject, but just for clarity, I may have misheard what you just said, but I just want to clarify that to the best of my knowledge, I'll ask staff to confirm, but the existing DA, to the best of my knowledge, does not include a height
Oh, no
limitation
height.
today.
Oh, the usage. Okay, let's start again. 32,500 square feet is the building size in the current DA. And currently, storage is not an approved use for this space. Even though the zoning says 65 feet, but this already has a DA on it. Correct?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, that's accurate.
Okay. So we need to put a motion or recommendation together for city council with those two items in place: intended use and building footprint, based on the current application that we have in front of us.
And Madam Chair, if it helps at all, I'm not opposed to the intended use. I don't think the staff was either. I think the intended use is fine. I will rely on the applicant that the neighbors would probably prefer something like that than maybe a busy restaurant or something. I don't have any issue with that. I don't have any issue with the footprint necessarily either. It's sort of the height is the issue for me. And maybe the recommendation to city council should be that P and Z, if everyone feels this way, but the P and Z approves it. But there's got to be some discussion and negotiation with regard to the height. Staff's looking at 35, applicant needs a minimum of 48. I'd like to believe there's some elegant solution to that. I don't know. I'm not a developer. I understand the economics involved as the applicant described. They're razor thin. But I'd like to find a way to get to where maybe both parties want to go. I'm not sure if that helps at all, Madam Chair.
Our motion needs to, I think, address those two items on whether it's a denial or approval to city council. Because either way, they're going to look at those things, right? The DA needs to be, the intended use is not there, so it needs to get there. And the square foot is there, and he wants to increase it. Currently, there's no height restriction in the DA, but there is a square footage and a intended use. So those two items need to be, whether it's approve or deny, be in the verbiage of our motion.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Sandoval.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the height, based on staff's findings, inconsistent with the comprehensive plan? Specifically 3.07.00? That's a question for staff.
You mean for the allowed uses? Is that what we're?
The height. You spoke to the visual impact not being harmonious with the existing areas, overshadowing character of site design, and overall inconsistence with the comprehensive plan 3.07.00.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
So basically, based on where this is located, it's like an infill development. And what is around it is not the same height that they're proposing. And that's why we're saying it doesn't fit in on that west side of Eagle Road with what's actually there. So basically, the way staff sees it is that it is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan because does not fit in with the surrounding area. And it will create all those issues that I outlined in my presentation.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm always reluctant to kind of go this next half a step. I'm going to do so in an effort to be helpful, but if I'm not being helpful and if I'm stepping out of my lane, just smack me. But so two thoughts for you. One is clearly there's some different opinions amongst the commissioners present this evening. So two potential ideas for you. One is you can reopen the public hearing and continue the item until you have more commissioners present. Those commissioners would have to review the record and be prepared to get up to speed and be prepared to act, but that would be an option if you're not able to if there's not sufficient votes to reach a decision tonight. That's an option for you. The second is this would be a very artful motion, but I'll put it out there, and it's really, I'm sure the city council would appreciate a more specific and concrete recommendation, but an artful form of a motion could be to say, the commission recommends approval in terms of the proposed modifications to the development agreement in terms of the additional use of self-storage, maintaining 32,500 square feet as a footprint, and the recommendation to council is that the height be less than 54.5 feet as determined by the city council or something of that nature. That would be a very artful way to do it, to get you to potentially to a decision tonight. Doesn't give great input to the council in terms of what that height ought to be, but that's an idea for you as well.
Commissioners, any thoughts? So if we just want to wait for other commissioners, it would be a continuance then for us?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if you decide you would, you're not able to make a decision this evening, you need your additional commissioners present to do so. My recommendation would be to reopen the public hearing and continue it to a date certain, and then have those the commissioners that are absent that will participate next time review the record thoroughly and be prepared to act, and then you can act at that point in time.
Okay, the applicant did indicate he wasn't really interested in a continuance, but we need the commissioners to, can we discuss that as commissioners?
You may, Madam Chair, yes. And that's really, at the end of the day, it's, if you need additional time to gather information or to consult with fellow commissioners that would provide value to the discussion, really your decision, it's really your prerogative if you choose to continue. Certainly, we try to be very deferential and respectful of the applicant's wishes, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's if the commission needs more time and more information, and don't have sufficient information this evening to make a decision, at the end of the day, it's your decision if you needed to continue the meeting for 2 weeks or the hearing.
Commissioners, do you feel like we can do a motion, or should we reopen the public hearing?
I could live with that artful recommendation where there's no specific height, but a cap on it.
Madam Chair, I agree. In the end, what we're giving is a recommendation to city council. They have the authority to do what they feel is best in this situation. I feel like we probably would only be hurting the applicant if we kicked it down the road to add a couple more commissioners to the discussion, who may or may not end up with a motion that the city council likes or doesn't like. We just don't know. I think it's open to some reasonable interpretation, and I'm guessing the city council may also have some differing opinions. So with that said, I tend to agree with Commissioner Garrett that maybe we tell the commission what we do think is okay in the modification to the DA, but with regard to the one sticking point, we simply say no more than this number. It's up to you to decide what you feel is reasonable. How we say that in a motion, though, is
Try.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner
I'm-
Sandoval?
I'm in agreement. I think we can get to a decision tonight here. Really specifically, maybe mentioning that recommended maximum height. And I'd likely be in favor of that.
All right, commissioners, who would like to give a motion?
Well, I can step in as I'm not good at the end of it and on the recommendations. I'll need some assistance. But after considering all staff and applicant and public testimony, I move to recommend the approval to the City Council of file number H 2023-0058 as presented to the staff report for the hearing date of March 21st, 2024, with the following modifications: that the height limitation would be capped at 48 feet. And what was your remainder?
So, Commissioner, I'll put air quotes around this, the artful motion that I mentioned earlier would be, the last part of that motion simply would be to say to recommend to the council as presented in the staff report, but with the modification that the height be less than 54.5 feet as determined by the council.
Okay, okay, I'll modify my recommendation that the height would be less than 54 feet and recommended by the Planning and Zoning Committee.
Can I clarify that the motion would also approve the modified use as a storage facility, and that would keep the footprint of the facility at 32,500 square feet.
Madam Chair and members of the commission, I'll defer to the motion maker as well, but that's how I would interpret the motion because the motion was to make the recommendation consistent with the staff report, and those items that Commissioner Grace just mentioned are all incorporated into the staff report. So I believe the motion does capture those items.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'll
Okay,
second that then, if that's the motion.
let me recap really fast
Sure.
here. So it has been moved to approve file number H 2023-0058 as a recommendation to the city council with the modifications that the height be less than 54.5 feet, that the footprint of 32,500 feet of the building, and to consider self-storage as an intended use. Is that it?
Yes.
And Madam Chair, just one quick note for the record. So those last two items are embedded in the staff report. So you're accurate. Your summary of the motion, I think, is accurate. I thought I heard you say 3,000.
32,000.
32,500
feet.
So I just wanted to clarify that figure.
All right, do we all have it, or do you need me to say it again?
We're good.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
So we have 2 with 1. And so,
So we need, so Madam Chair, we'll need, because there's 4 members present this evening, you need a majority. So it requires 3 affirmative votes. The chair is permitted to vote. I know sometimes Mr. Seal does not, but you are permitted to vote. So I would, I'll leave it at that.
all right, I will cast my vote as yes. So we have 3 in favor and 1 not in favor.
So the motion does carry, and you have finished that item.
Okay. All right, that one's done. And then I've kind of gotten caught up in the weeds here. I think we need one more motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and second to adjourn this meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone.